So I've taken a look at my favourite games of 2020, and if you haven't already, then please go check out that video, as they're all games definitely worth playing. But now we get to the other side of the coin, and it's the worst games that I've played in 2020. Now, I don't go out of my way to play bad games, and just like I mentioned in the other video, I haven't played every game released of course this year, but these do range from disappointments which had issues, through to games which I wish I could just erase from my memory. Of course, if you liked the video, then please subscribe, like, comment and give it a share on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, or wherever you like sharing content, and let's get to the list of my worst gaming experiences of 2020. Coming in at number 5, it's Marvel's Avengers, and this is more of a disappointment than an actual game that is straight up bad, and this in no way could take out the top spots, but let's take a look at why. Marvel's Avengers has a decent campaign for anybody looking to play through a superhero story, even if most of the characters seem to sound like they're going to fall asleep apart from Kamala Khan, and that's saying something, as some of the biggest voice actors in video games is here with Troy Baker, Nolan North and Laura Bailey. There was some praise heaped on the single player portion of the game at release, but I never found it to go beyond anything but good, as the problems that inhabit other parts of the game are also here in this mode. It's graphically good, with each of the superheroes animated well, with enough detail to make it definitely one of the game's strong points, and certain environments can also look good at times as well. Even the combat goes beyond the standard button masher, especially when you begin to open up more and more moves for each character. But then we get to why it's on this list, and it starts with the level design, and even just mentioning the word design here is making it sound like there actually is some. Most of the levels consist of open areas with boxes and crates everywhere, with invisible walls and ceilings constraining you within a certain area. Kind of stupid when Iron Man can't even fly up all that high. Also, apart from these levels are the buildings and structures, which consist of the same boring corridors over and over again, and especially when you're doing the same activities repeatedly, which aren't even that good to begin with. And all of this is whilst you're chasing the most uninteresting loot around, regardless of any stat increases or perks it gives you, especially when you can't even see it on your character, which fits right in with the almost total lack of customization. Add all of these issues together and there really is no point grinding endlessly, as you'll barely be having enough fun, and the levels and activities will make sure you're enjoying it as little as possible. And then we get to all the bullshit corporate rubbish linked to this game, like certain skins or items you could get based on products you bought and all the rest. This game perceived its superpower to be trying to extract the most money from consumers and not giving enough in return. If this just focused on the single player, or even tried to deliver a proper games as a service, then it wouldn't make this list, but it does. With a player count less than the amount of characters in the game it seems, Marvel's Avengers needs major changes if it is to survive. For number 4, we have a lesser known game, and it's Those Who Remain. Think of a first person Silent Hill or Alan Wake, and now don't make it good, and instead replace the good parts with mediocre movement and puzzles, all mostly set in a creepy and dark, rain-soaked town where figures in the dark stalk you with their flickering eyes and all. The game follows the main character who has lost his family and is on the way to a motel to break off his affair, and that's where the strangeness sets in. I actually didn't mind the setting of the game, with that creepy country town vibe, complete with the signature diners, police stations and farmsteads. But where the game lost me the most, like many similar games, is that it isn't scary. There's always a menacing like tune in the background when exploring, and the figures in the dark that are near you do add to the atmosphere somewhat, but any type of fear quickly fades when you realise they just stand there because the game lends all too often on cliche. Just stay in the light. They don't move or anything, and often just come across like cardboard cutouts that are part of a low budget movie. In other reviews or videos, I've mentioned the importance in these sorts of games in focusing on tension and suspense when trying to deliver scares, but this doesn't at all. Instead, it cuts to regular load screens that kills the atmosphere. As I mentioned before, the setting is quite good and is also the standard cliched setting, but when everything seems to have been done before and better, then Those Who Remain doesn't really offer much or any real reason to play it. It is at a more budget price as well, but even if you have the urge to play it, there is no harm in holding off and just playing something better if you're looking for some scares. I wanted to like this, but the scariest thing about it was how it was an effort to keep playing it. At number 3, we have a game I actually liked the campaign a lot, and it's Call of Duty Cold War. The reason this is here is because the amount of issues I had with this game made Cyberpunk 2077 look like it was the most well-made game of the year, with no issues at all. And if you're curious, Cyberpunk 2077 is on my best games of the year list. But Cold War has a great campaign, which mixes up levels filled with gunplay, or others where it's completely gone and you're more focused on stealth. When playing on the Series X, the game looks fantastic and it runs fantastic, but it doesn't really matter how well it looks or performs if I keep being sucked out of the experience because it either keeps freezing or it regularly hard resets my console. This is made worse because it is a Call of Duty game where the campaigns aren't that long anyway. That doesn't bother me, but I simply gave up trying to finish the game around the 4-hour mark as I grew tired and annoyed with the constant issues. I counted 10 hard crashes when my Series X shut itself off, and 3 times where it froze and I had to restart the game. These things can happen, but this is way too regular for such a long-running series. This is the reason it's on the list at number 3. If it didn't happen at all, or even just once or twice, then it wouldn't be here at all. And yes, turning off ray tracing is meant to help, but no, turning off features in the game just for it to run isn't a solution. And this was still crashing weeks after release. I always liked playing through the Call of Duty campaigns, no matter their quality. I even liked Ghosts. Not so much Black Ops 3, but still finished it. But the problems with Cold War turned me off, and I just didn't have a chance to check out zombies or multiplayer, which I admit I'm not a huge fan of. But I'd still like the opportunity to play them, so I can complain some more, you know? I'm just kidding about that last part, but I did have way more major problems with this than I did with Cyberpunk. Seeing these problems are even worse when you like the game, but oh well, that's just the way it goes. At number 2 we have the 13 Remake, and this took a very good older game from the early 2000s, which was unique and turned it into just a distant shadow of its former self. The problem lies in why the hell remake it in the first place if everything about it is worse. The developers have even issued an apology stating the difficulties in getting the game out in 2020, and which meets their standards and fans' expectations, but when forking over the money for this, you won't feel anything but regret, regardless if it's a little bit cheaper than full price. The problems start at the visual presentation, where they almost left behind the great comic book look of the original and went with this blend of what looks to be Fortnite and the original, and what we end up with is a much worse look than the original for no real reason. Then we get to the animation of the characters, which is incredibly poor. Enemies seem to skip so many frames, they just look stilted and completely unnatural whenever they do anything. Then there is the collision detection. Breaking chairs over enemies can vary with how it actually looks, and where sometimes there is a slight delay with the impact. And again, it just looks unnatural. The gunplay in the 13 Remake continues the downward spiral, with it having no real weight. Guns can vary wildly in terms of how good they sound, but then this leads on to the more technical issues. Bullets would often just go through enemies with no impact, like I hadn't even shot them at all. The enemy AI shows nothing intelligent, whether from how they move to getting stuck on the environment. There is no consistency. There were even times where items would disappear, but the problems were even seen from the very start. We see an FBI agent wander into a room to watch a video. All well and good, you'd think, but he's just watching the opening clip from the original game. Instead of, remaking it, the developers went the quickest, easiest and lamest path there is, and it just shows from the opening how bad this game is. Don't buy it, don't even entertain the idea. And at number 1, we have the completely forgettable and craptastic Fast and the Furious Crossroads. This one can be summed up pretty easily. The gameplay is boring and uninteresting, the story is uninteresting and boring, the characters are boring and uninteresting, the visuals are not bad, but altogether it's all boring and uninteresting, and I found myself only playing in short bursts as I couldn't take much more of it at any one time. The gameplay itself is so mediocre. Often it's this mishmash of car racing and burnout takedown, but it fails at both, with cars that seem to float and move on the roads like they're wet sponges on wheels. Then we plow our car into the enemy cars in a completely sideways move, which is ridiculous. Why wouldn't characters whose whole life it seems revolves around these hotted up cars resort to crashing their rides into somebody else as their first option? We're not doing this, we are racing around tracks where at times I could barely even see where I was going, especially at night, or when we are driving to locations and need to listen to the new characters go on and on about nothing really. It doesn't start any better either when we are introduced to the characters portrayed by Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez. These two sound like they're voiced from two people who just woke up and were doing their most monotone impression of Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez. Vin Diesel looks like he has balloons shoved under his shirt, and Michelle Rodriguez looks like some odd version of herself. If I was to say anything good about this game, maybe, is that there might be some small parts of interest in the story, however slight they are, but I couldn't get over the one-dimensional and completely forgettable gameplay, along with its erratic car behaviour at times. This hugely successful movie franchise should go hand in hand with video games, but it doesn't at all, and will need to wait longer to receive a game worthy of playing. This isn't a case of a game being so bad it's good. No, it's a case of it's so bad that it's just bad. Skip this completely, even if it's on sale, and for these reasons, it's why it's my worst game of 2020. So which game took out your worst game award for the year? Or which game disappointed you, and why was that? There were a lot of quality games released during this year, as I spell out in my best of 2020 list video, so I urge you to play those more and leave these games alone. So if you liked the video, then please like, comment, subscribe, or share the video around, and I'll catch you on the next video.